Across our nation, October has been declared National Bullying Prevention Month. Now, it's a sad but paradoxical truth that bullying becomes its most vicious at the same phase in life, when young people are forming their independent understandings of what is fair and what is right, at a time when children should be discovering the best ways to treat one another. The weak and the unpopular among them are subjected to the very worst. When they most need to discover the meanings of law and just authority, as we've seen in the film, authority too often fails. Now, we've just watched a very painful film, a very thoughtful film, made more painful for many of us, I'm sure, because of the memories that it may stir in our own minds. I certainly wish I had $1 for every time I was told, just ignore them, they'll stop. They never stopped. I myself am mindful of a day that I lived through in middle school when a classmate who was handsome, blonde, full of smiles, and the grown-ups were looking, blithely tossed a lighted match down my neck. I remember thinking in those days that if I could just hold on, if I could just be patient, my own weapons, those of thoughts and of words, would one day be stronger than the physical force that was then keeping me down. And so I stayed patient. And it turned out that it was true. Eventually, my weapons did become the stronger weapons. But there should be no need for oppressed and bullied children to have to wait until they are grown up for that tide to turn. Decency, kindness, and respect are all parts of the human personality, but we do not always instinctively choose them. Much of the behavior that we call moral must be slowly, carefully taught and learned.
I want to thank John Jay, Jeremy Travis. We have a long relationship at the Manhattan DA's office with John Jay, and I particularly appreciate the imaginative, the proactive way that this school deals with so many issues that we all care deeply about, including bullying. As the Manhattan District Attorney, we find ourselves dealing with criminal cases. And I will tell you that one of the more difficult parts of our job in the DA's office is to deal with issues that relate to crimes against young men and women, both the victims and the perpetrators. And one thing that I'm dedicated to as the Manhattan District Attorney is the issue of prevention. Everyone in this room, I think, would agree that if we can prevent a crime from happening, we would far prefer that outcome than to prosecute a case in our courtroom. And so the work of our office in the area of cyberbullying is really all about prevention. I go high school to high school around Manhattan with some of the folks you'll talk about, talking about making young teens aware of how things have changed. What was bullying in a schoolyard, which has been around forever, on the internet, the consequences now are permanent, and they are also, from time to time now, criminal. And so I'm deeply concerned, as my staff is, about this issue. And tonight you will hear from the head of our Cybercrime Bureau, David Suchman, about what he is doing, along with Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, the head of our trial division, about the work of our office in this area.
Whether it's personal, professional, whatever, wherever you're setting, we're all here because we all face the same issues, and we're all looking for better ways to handle it. Then hopefully they'll never come to us, to the district attorney's office, because that's the last place. That means we've all failed if it comes to our door. So we go out there and we talk to people in hopes that we can help and help you find the answers that are there for your particular situation.
Can everyone hear me okay? So I do a lot of work in bully prevention, and I've been doing this for about 20 years. And I think I'm here partly because I do a lot of speaking around the country. I feel kind of blessed to be in this field, but I do a lot of work. I'm kind of the person who puts out all the material for summer camps on bully prevention. I do work in schools. And particularly with this movie, I met David Lawrence, who asked me to come and speak, but I have to say that I was Lee Hirsch's, the producer's, first interview for this movie.
My name is David Kazansky. I'm the Director of School Safety for the United Federation of Teachers. which is the teachers union here in the city. We represent the teachers of the 1,700 public schools. And we embarked on an anti-bullying campaign called Be Brave Against Bullying about this time last year, really focusing on trying to see what we could do as educators about the subject and how dealing with bullying and other issues make schools safer and better places for students to learn and for teachers to teach.
Good evening, everybody. My name is David Szuchman. I'm the chief of the Cybercrime and Identity Theft Bureau at the Manhattan DA's office. And as the district attorney and Karen both have said, this is an issue that our office cares deeply about. In fact, my position didn't exist in the office prior to 2010. And when Mr. Vance came into the office and began looking at what the issues were across Manhattan, across the state, and nationally, he decided that in order to play the proper role in this space, we needed a dedication of resources and a dedication of purpose in this area. I get plenty of parents all over talking to me about, well, I have an 11-year-old kid, the kid goes to sleep with the phone under their pillow, how do I deal with that? There are parental issues that you need to deal with in that space, but there are also just simple solutions that can help you get control of this. So you don't. How many of you are on Facebook, kids? Raise your hands.
Adults, how many of you are on Facebook? I think everybody's probably on Facebook in this room except me.
So just quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time with this, but if you're on Facebook or your kid is on Facebook, first of all, the first thing you should do is friend your kid. I think that's a common thing that everybody should know. And if you're an aunt, an uncle, a close family friend, friend the kid that you're interested in because you want to see what the child is up to. And these are things that you need to discuss with your kid prior to letting them get onto the social networking site, prior to giving them the phone. Because once they have the phone, once they have the account, the die has already been cast. So you need to think about what are the rules that you're going to set up with your young teen before you actually get out there and put them on these things with no thought. Because if there's no thought and you haven't given thought to who is going to communicate with your kid, who's going to try to lure your kid, who are the kids who are going to bully your kid. There's so many different issues that crop up from allowing your child on Facebook that you need to really have a plan. So don't just say yes, let them sign up and get an account. Say, yeah, but we need to work through some of these issues, and then let's talk about what they are. So if you're going to sign your kid up for Facebook, you see that Michelle Moy from our office, who's behind the laptop there, is on the right side, and you can see there that there are privacy settings. It's a privacy setting tab. And let me just start by saying Facebook changes this stuff all the time, all the time. So you need to stay current with it. You need to look at what they're pushing out in terms of their privacy settings because they will change. But if you go to that tab, Michelle has taken you to 3 tabs that you can choose from here: Public, Friends, and Custom. I recommend you go to Custom because this allows you now to customize who is going to be accessible to your child's account. Who is going to have access to seeing that picture that they're taking of them and their friend at a certain location? Who's going to have access to what they like and what they don't like so they can start cataloging what they do like, because then they can figure out what your child's interests are and potentially groom your child for things that you don't want your child groomed for. And I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but this is just, you have to think about the underbelly of this in order to make sure that your kid is safe. So you're going to want to go to Custom. You have choices throughout of who is going to have access. Friends of friends, friends, specific people, and only me. So friends are the people that your child is choosing to allow in their network. Friends of friends are that second person removed. I did a talk at Stuyvesant a year ago, about 600 kids. And when I asked the kids how many people have 500 or more friends on Facebook, the hands just went up. How many people here have more than 300 friends on Facebook? Anybody? Plenty of hands. And what I say to kids, and you might not want to hear this, I see you're smiling over there, is you can't have 300 friends. It's just not possible. So you have to think about who you're allowing the friends of friends to be, because that's the extended network now who knows what you're up to, who knows what you're doing. So think about this when you go through these privacy settings are, what's realistic? You don't want to clamp down on your kid too much because then they're going to push back. So you want to be realistic about, is it just friends that are going to see it or friends of friends? I can make a recommendation, only friends, but you as a parent have to decide what that is. And then you're just going to hit Save Changes. And now that is set. You can then go into, why don't we just go to a timeline, Michelle? I know there's lots of other settings, and this is just to give you a sample. If you haven't seen this as a parent or even as a student sitting here of what you can do, it's important. Timeline and tagging. The timeline on Facebook, if you're not familiar with that, if you joined Facebook 3 or 4 years ago, they're going to start collecting everything that you did. So your timeline, if you liked something or if you tagged something years ago, that's going to stay on Facebook. So if you don't want people to be able to comment on your tag, if you don't want those bullying situations to start because you're putting on something that you like and someone can then say, you know, look at this geek, look at this freak, look at this situation, whatever it may be, you can restrict that. Who can post on your timeline? Michelle put up there, no one. No one can post on your timeline. That restricts people from commenting on you and what you're doing. Who can see other posts on your timeline? If you want to let some people post, who is that going to be? Just your friends, friends of friends, etc. Review posts. Who can see your posts? All of these are accessible and available controls that Facebook has set up, and they're quite good. They really have done a much better job of setting up privacy settings that are really important. And then you just click done, and you're out of that setting. Last one I just want to quickly go through is block people and apps. You can block people by name. That will look up on Facebook automatically. It will populate automatically as you pop in the name or the email address. That will start to block people that you do not want to have access to your page. That's a great feature. It's something that people should think about. You can block app invites. You can block event invites, all kinds of block availabilities. But what this requires is parents to be engaged in what their kids are doing online. And as I said, I'm a prosecutor, so my role is not to preach, but it is to just say, if you want to have safety online, you have to be involved with your kids. And these parental controls are just one example of parental controls that exist on many privacy settings that exist on many social networking sites.
Even seeing this can kind of like start spinning in your head, right? Because it's overwhelming if you don't know a lot about technology. But I think his point is well taken that as parents, it's kind of like any other issue we deal with our kids. If we're going to let them use technology, we kind of have to know what they're doing. And you can do it at a very simple level, and the earlier you do it with them, the better. So, you know, make it a point to learn, because if you learn it, they will be more accountable to that. If you don't, that's where the scary stuff starts.
The movie that we saw, which by the way I thought was phenomenal, is very traditional, sort of old school bullying in a way, right? It's obvious. It's obvious that when you're beating someone up on the bus, it's bullying. It's obvious that when you're calling someone names, it's bullying. It's obvious, you know, when you're pushing someone into a locker, it's bullying. I get a lot of kids and parents who say, I don't know if I'm being bullied because it's happening online. No one's hitting me, no one's saying something to my face, but they're making me feel bad, and they're forwarding someone who I thought was my friend and I shared something with, forward an intimate picture of me or something I said to them, or they're making stuff up about me and forwarding it over and over and over again. And I didn't know that it's bullying, and I don't know what to do about it, and I'm not sure. Could somebody talk to that, and what you think about that, and what people should do about it?
The thing is, it's actually one of the difficult issues is what is it and what isn't it, right? You have to look at bullying in terms of power. It's when one or more kids actually use their power or their advantage in some way to make themselves feel more powerful and stronger at someone else's expense. It's not conflict or fighting where you have two equals disagreeing or battling, because the power is even. And lots of times that gets confusing if you see two kids fighting, but fighting is more equal, even if it looks like it's a power imbalance. But when there is a marginalization of someone, that's bullying, and that happens in lots of different ways. Traditionally with physical bullying, which we saw a lot of, verbal bullying, name-calling, harassment, intimidation, and that's actually more painful because it's psychological to lots of kids. The scars last longer. And the worst kind is what we call relational bullying, which is exclusion. That's when kids are marginalized and their social peer group is affected, so they feel like they have no friends. That is the most painful, because kids' need to connect is incredibly strong, especially in teen years.
In regards to this problem, on the federal level, there are a few things that we are doing to address the large issue of bullying. For administrators and community groups, we've published a guide to anti-bullying programs. For parents, we've implemented our family engagement link on our website, which has a list of tools that could be a great resource for parents to combat bullying. And as well as on August 30th, we published a blog directed to parents, which gives 5 easy tips and tools to prevent bullying. For teachers, we've also released just this week a toolkit for teachers. So we are trying to do quite a few things to recognize the amount of increase due to social networking that bullying has taken on.
So the United Federation of Teachers has created something called the BRAVE campaign, stands for Building Respect, Acceptance, and Voice Through Education. Mr. Kazansky, would you please tell us a little bit about that campaign?
You know, in most all of the literature that's out there about bullying, that first step is to find a trusted friend or a trusted adult to turn to, and even just so you can have that conversation and get it off your chest and start to strategize on what to do. And while we have guidance counselors and social workers and psychologists in schools, some of our students don't have access to those folks. They don't necessarily feel like perhaps those conversations are kept within those walls at times. It's very difficult to talk to the guidance counselor when the bully is outside the guidance counselor's office waiting for you to come out. So what we did was we got together with the Mental Health Association of New York City, and we created an anti-bullying hotline that's open in the afternoons, Monday through Friday, from 2:30 to 9:30 at night. And it's staffed with licensed mental health professionals who our students can call and have that conversation. This is happening to me at school. I'm having this issue on Facebook. Get some strategies, learn some skills in coping, and then get directed to the right resources at the school level, and then the community level, so that they can get the help they need to deal with the issue. The strategy, and someone had said before, of ignore it or shake hands, that stuff doesn't work. And so what we need to do is we need to find a way not only to deal with the child that's being bullied, but the child that's exhibiting those behaviors of bullying, and figure out a way to work with both children to get the situation fixed.
Trying to figure out if your son or daughter is being bullied is actually a little complicated, because it depends on your age of your child, and it depends on the kind of bullying they have, and symptoms can show up in lots of different ways. In young kids, we worry most about physical symptoms. Kids who get headaches, right, or stomach aches, and they're stressed in some way. The main issue being they don't want to go to school or an activity that they really like to do. If they stop doing something fun with friends, you wonder, what happened to their social group? It's usually related to social issues. But there's a lot of other things we also hear about. Kids not having lunch money. They don't get to eat their lunch. Kids stealing things from them. There's a lot of subtle signs. But most important, I think the way to think about this, rather than look for the signs to happen, is just to first dialogue with them on a routine basis, once a month, with kind of simple questions you can say to your children. Because if you ask this question, how's school today, you're going to get a one-word answer, right? I mean, no one's going to really talk to you about that.
Really, that happens to you too? It's not just my house?
No, it's all of us, right? But if you say, who'd you sit with at lunch today? Who'd you play with at recess or hang out with, right? And here's the 3 easy questions. Do you ever notice any kids at lunch or recess or on the bus who get teased or picked on? Does that ever happen to you? If you ask those questions in a normal way without a lot of emotion, and you let them know that you care about this, and it's not going to be a big deal if they share the information back to you because they may be embarrassed or uncomfortable or afraid you're going to be upset with them, lots of good possibilities that they'll tell you about what's happening. But you have to ask. You can't assume they're going to tell you. Ask it in a low-key way, and I think that's the best way to get the information right up front.
There seems to be a shift from this concept of being a bystander to being an upstander, and it's a new term that's out there. But a bystander is not necessarily someone who just sits back and watches. A bystander could be somebody who's cheering it on, or someone who, like we talked about before, in a cyber bullying way, will forward the information from one to the other simply because they think it's funny or whatever the case may be. And what in essence they're doing is they're not the creator of that bullying instance, but they're certainly not doing anything to stop it. And so they're fanning that flame and they're feeding that fire. And what we need to do is move our students and our kids from thinking that kind of behavior in itself is okay. Well, I'm not the one doing the actual bullying. I just thought that was really funny, so I posted it too. To getting them to realize that that's a damaging action on their own, and finding out ways to first stop that behavior and then figure out ways to encourage others to stop it.
If you poll or or ask teachers or faculty in the school about the bullying problem, and then you do the same with kids, sometimes you get very different answers. And this is a big issue, which is faculty don't necessarily see bullying to the same extent students do, because it may not be happening in front of them. And because of that, when you ask students what's happening, they get to see it because they're in the trenches. So it turns out that because they see it, they're also involved. This whole bystander piece is 70% of kids watch kids do the bullying or the targets. So the prevailing theory used to be if you engage them rather than have them stand around, they're not supporting the bullying kid or the bullying behavior, would get them involved. The problem is we can train them and encourage them to step up. It doesn't mean they're going to do it, because there's a tremendous fear that if they are stepping up, that they will become the next target. Now, that doesn't mean they shouldn't do something. They do have to be, we have to encourage them to do something anyway. Only a small percentage of kids will actually stand up directly to stop a bullying kid. However, they do need to do something empathetic, caring, and supportive of this culture that you were speaking about, which is right. And that means encourage them to support that target in another way. Maybe behind the scenes, walk with them to class, have them go up to a teacher and let someone know, send an email together. Let them know they're not alone. That was really the main, like the point you made before. If they feel they have caring people around, whether it be students or adults, we can really make a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think a key point on this is when you talk about the cyberbullying aspect of it, a lot of the bullying isn't happening in front of the teachers. In fact, it's not even happening at school. It's when the kids leave, grab their devices, and then start texting, social networking, and that's where a lot of the bullying starts. But that is forwarded by the group that is watching. The bystanders, if you will. So when you talk about what kids can do that maybe isn't standing up to the bully, but if you don't forward it, it dies. It stays in that spot in cyberspace, and that's how this whole bullying. I mean, what was fascinating, I thought about the movie was that was really what I would call old school kind of bullying. It's on the playground, it's on the bus. It wasn't cyber oriented, very damaging stuff. But throw in the fact that when the kids get off the bus, are they taking a video of that kid getting beat up and then sending it virally around in a matter of moments? And that ups the ante, it ups the game. So kids can play a role in this by just not passing it on. Just don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution.
David Suchman, at what point can bullying become criminal?
So we examine this issue very carefully as to what that line is for us. The crimes, there's not a bullying statute per se, criminal statute per se in New York State. We have statutes such as aggravated harassment, which is a Class A misdemeanor. So if there are communications that are going to somebody repeatedly, either by writing, by electronic means, or otherwise, and that is a pattern of harassment that occurs, you're now into a criminal area. And that can actually happen very quickly and very easily. And it could be just a couple of communications. It doesn't have to be 50 or 100. Those just kind of add more counts potentially on what we're talking about in terms of a criminal aspect. So the line can be crossed fairly quickly.
Like say a young woman or young girl, a teenager is in a dating relationship with another person, and maybe takes an intimate picture of herself and forwards it to her boyfriend. They break up, and then he forwards it on. What happens what happens then?
Yeah, now we're into a sexting example, and the first thing that comes to my mind is please don't ever do that, because one, the person who took the picture has now created, potentially, depending on the age of the kid, potentially has created an image of child pornography. And that image of child pornography is now sent to her boyfriend, who they're passionately in love on day one, and on day two now they've broken up, and boyfriend decides now he's going to forward it on to the rest of the world because he's cool and that's going to be entertaining to everybody. Boyfriend has now committed the offense of distribution of child pornography, and potentially every person that opens it and is in possession of that child pornography has also committed a crime.
And those are felonies,
and
right?
Those are felony crimes, and in New York State, it's it could be an E-level or higher offense, which now you're talking about potential mandatory state prison, depending on how high you go. But federally, you're talking about mandatory minimums that carry some serious jail time when you start getting into the federal system, which those cases can fall under that. So once you're creating images of child pornography and you're trading them, and we've seen those cases charged throughout the country, It's not something we're looking to do in the Manhattan DA's office, but most certainly those crimes can be charged and those offenses are being committed in the example that Karen just gave.
The girl may not want to send that picture. The girl may not want to take that picture, but the boyfriend will say, if you love me, you'll. And that's down that road of our kids wanting to feel loved and wanted by whoever gives them that moment of happiness in their life. And so, I tell my daughter, if you are ever in a relationship and the person on the other end of that relationship starts a sentence with, if you love me, you'll, don't do whatever comes after that, especially if it's take a picture of yourself.
I have a couple teenagers at home, and they would say I stalk them on Facebook. But what I do is I go on every night. I'm just curious. What are they doing? What are their friends saying? Are they happy? Are they upset? Are they? And so I just sort of go on there and monitor, and then of course I go onto their friends' pages and all that other stuff. But so I noticed there's a boy that likes one of my daughters very much. They talk very often, and I notice his Facebook name is, I'm not going to say his real name, but I will say I'm not going to say his real name, but it's John Coke Boy Smith. And of course, I said, Coke Boy, what is this? And meanwhile, how can I approach my daughter? Because then she'll know that I'm on her Facebook page, and I don't want her to know. And so, but I've been thinking about it and thinking about what impression that makes. And so he came over our house recently, and I just kind of, started talking to him. And so you're on Facebook, and you guys have to be careful because you're going to be applying to colleges soon and jobs soon, and people look at stuff like that, and you have to be careful about the impression that you're going to make. People could misinterpret things. And the next day, he took it down, and he changed it to just John Smith. I was very happy about that. But, it's things like that you have to talk to your children about and really get involved in and just make sure that they understand sort of what they're doing. Dr. Haber, through your work, what's the question you get asked the most by parents?
Well, what do I do if my child's bullied? How do I help? That's probably the most impressive one. And it's the most important thing, I just want to answer that, is to say, if your child reports a bullying incident to you, is to try to listen to it without getting really reactive about it and angry and upset, because it's natural inside. We're human beings. And believe me, I've done this myself. When I've heard things, I react because I'm human. But we want to be able to listen to what our children are saying and just try to listen calmly and let them know that it's okay and safe for them to talk to us. Because the reality is, if we get emotional and get angry, that's the last time they're going to tell us anything about their situation. So that's probably the key thing, is to kind of keep it low key, try to get information and data, and ask your kids, depending on their age, especially if they're old in elementary school age, what do they want to do about it? Try to put some power back into their lap. But with new laws, we try to always encourage you to, or to tell your kids we're going to call the school if they're comfortable with that. The school wants to know what you can do confidentially. Kids are always afraid if you call the school, it's going to turn into a worse nightmare. But work with your kids on a plan if they need it. And sometimes they may want to try it out themselves, which is fine. Talk to the kid is doing the bullying, ignore them, whatever. Sometimes it may be nothing, and the second day it'll be fine. But if things continue, you want to be more involved and help them brainstorm and problem solve solutions with the school in a way that makes them feel like they will not be exposed more, because that's their big fear.
Think about the technology, think about how you can be armed in that fight, and also look for the warning signs. If your kid is being bullied online, your kid is going to most likely start to remove themselves from that device. They're going to walk away from that site that they were visiting, or you'll see that they'll retreat from that. Those are warning signs, and if you see them starting to leave the phone there that they were clinging to for so long, that's a pretty good sign that something's happening. So stay engaged with the technology and what your kids are doing, and don't use it as a crutch in your parental skills.
After giving these talks, I've often had parents come up to me afterward and say, thank you so much for doing this. I unplugged my kid and took their computer away, took their phone away. Or I've had kids come up to me the next day and say, what did you say to my parents last night? They took away my device. That is not what I think any of us are saying. So would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The discussion has changed. When I first started doing this stuff, you could say to a parent, put the desktop in the living room or in the den where everybody could see it. That's not realistic anymore, So the kids need to be on it, otherwise they're going to be somewhat socially ostracized, and that's not what we're advocating. But we're advocating give yourself a percentage better chance by thinking about the tools and tips that we're giving you here.
One of the things that is a business that has kind of blossomed are these companies that will allow you to spy on your children, and if the only thing I can say, I mean, besides my personal aversion to that kind of thing, is that what you're doing is showing, if you're a parent and you're doing that to your child, you're showing your child you don't trust them. You're not showing them that you want to be a part of their life and that you're concerned and interested in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. You're basically telling your child, I don't trust you, therefore I'm going to monitor secretly every transmission that you make in life. And I think that, that's certainly a wrong approach. And when Joel talked about, overreacting, on a personal level with your child when you're having that, I think to some extent that kind of spy software does that. And so the only thing I can tell parents is, yes, be engaged, but be open about it and have those discussions with your children about, okay, well, I am going to monitor this and I am going to check your Twitter feed, or, let's talk about what text you've received. That's the way to do it, and I think you'll avoid that kind of fear of, listen, kids are smart. If they know you're spying on Facebook page 1, they're going to make Facebook page 2 that you don't know about. So
what if they say, Dad, you don't trust me? And can't I have some privacy? And you're not reading my diary. I don't understand. You're not listening on my phone calls. How come I can't have privacy? You don't trust me.
Well, I mean, that's a discussion, right? It's about explaining to your kids that you care about them, not that you don't believe that they can do things by themselves. And it's not something that's a 5-minute discussion that you can read from a book and you're done. It's something that needs to start somewhere and build, and it's a relationship that you're going to have with your kid that hopefully they'll understand where you're coming from. Hopefully.
That the most important thing that I would speak to you about is think about yourselves as parents. Think about how you role model to your children. It's not what you say to them, because I've learned the hard way that what I say is not really what they listen to, it's what I do. And that if you are a model of gossip, or because they hear you gossiping, trust me, they're going to do a lot of that with their friends. If you're a role model of, handling conflicts aggressively, they may take on a very aggressive tact if they're upset with something, right? So you have to think, what am I role modeling? Am I role modeling kindness, respect, cooperation? What do they see? And this comes up usually when parents have to approach a school because their kid's been bullied and the parent storms into the principal's office and gets really aggressive and demands action. That is not the best role model for your kid, because you're basically showing them to be aggressive and bullying themselves on some level. Think about how you approach your kids. And if you can just take it easy and think about the way you interact and the way you talk about people. Do you talk about people behind their backs? Do you gossip? Like I said, if you do that and you catch yourself, just own it. It's not a big deal. Show your kids, hey, you made a mistake. So they can feel safe if they make a mistake or they do something that's bad, to let you know about it. Because we don't think about our own selves and our behavior when we're parenting.
Thank you very much for your attention, everybody. Okay.